Good evening, treasure seekers. This is Blake coming to you live from New Mexico, and joining me as always from Washington State, it's Bryn and Cody. How's it going, guys?
Good evening. We're doing well. I don't know if I have anything to add. I'm getting a cold.
No.
I know. Cold strike again on TTI pod.
Sorry to hear that. Cody, everything going well with you? Are you getting a cold?
No, not yet. Not yet. No, I don't have a cold. I got a little bit of like the post holidays bummers right now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Nothing but good news on the podcast.
What a bunch of negative Nancy's.
We're cheery. I've been trying some other fun activities to try and boost my own morale after the holidays. Made a big fancy pasta dinner tonight, but it was half fun and half chaos and took twice as long as I thought it would.
Did you hand make the pasta or what?
Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay, so that is
and the sauce and everything. Yeah.
Oh, that's a big commitment. Good job.
It was good.
Yeah, everything was good, and then I put frozen scallops on boiling oil.
you started a grease fire. Started grease fire, and then try to put it out with water.
Yeah.
And then you mix some bleach and ammonia to clean it up. Wah wah.
Horseshoes and hand grenades.
All right. Yeah, I might be traveling next week, so this could get a little messy too, just as a heads up. So,
really?
Last minute trip. So, I'll keep you posted.
You gonna podcast from the plane?
No, absolutely not. Although I might be able to get some new listeners. Ooh.
Nice.
All right, should we start our podcast now? There's Treasure Inside, the unofficial podcast. News. You said you wanted to do a news segment?
Yeah. Speaking of the holidays, so we don't have any hard-hitting news, but we realized that we never reported this little nugget of news coming out of the holidays. Blake got scammed and accidentally bought a fake TTI book, and he nicely gifted it to Cody and I for Christmas. It's extra hilarious because if you hold it up, Cody, just the scale of this fake book. It's just like a little tiny. It's an official notebook for keeping all of your notes.
How come you don't have
the treasure hunt?
How come you don't have a bunch of notes in there, Cody?
I know.
I want to keep it in mint condition.
I know. It's a first edition.
It's a first edition scam book.
I mean, we had done a news segment on all the fake copies of the book early on, right? And
yes,
just to defend myself a little bit here, so we don't lose all credibility. I was traveling the day of the actual book release, right? And so I was going to have to wait like 5 or 6 days before I could actually get my copy because I bought it online. And so like a few days before I left on my trip, I was looking on Amazon and I saw, ooh, there's a softcover version available. And it comes a couple days early. So I'm like, ooh, I'm going to get the book early before my trip so I can read it on my trip. I was so excited. And so I got scammed. Yes, absolutely. And then gave it to you as a gift for Christmas. You're welcome.
It does make me laugh every time I see it, so it was worth it.
This is the attention to detail you're getting from TTI Unofficial Podcast.
Yeah, that's a horrible news segment. Thanks.
It's okay. Right. It was worthy.
Should we get into some real content that's not embarrassing? I mean, I guess I guess this is pertinent to today's chapter, right? Because Jon Collins-Black tells us his most embarrassing moment of his life. I don't think this is.
Did you say it was his most embarrassing of his life?
Yes.
Oh, really?
Yes, he did. All right, horseshoes and hand grenades. don't think that's the normal horseshoes and hand grenades, but that is okay. And I don't think it's sad at all. I want to dive into the Pokemon box more. So after we had our 2-hour long episode and Cody, you've revealed your theory, I got pretty excited about that and have been going headfirst into the Pokemon chapter and want to reveal a few more goodies that I've come up with over the past few days. So this might be a little bit long, but maybe there's some good stuff. Maybe there's some confirmation bias. We'll see. Anyway, I want to share some additional bolstering of some of your ideas, Cody, and throw in some of my own. I've got a whole list here that I'm going to go through. So first, let's talk a little bit more about the Bouffalant section. The Bouffalant, I think, was important in your solve, Cody. Was it because of the geo-locking of Pokemon Go? Was that part of your... Okay.
Well, so the geo-locking is something that I discussed relative to Klefki, because Klefki is geo-locked to France, right. France, Kalos region, Froakie, kind of all one big linear thing there. I had actually known that Bouffalant was a geo-locked Pokemon for a while now, and it just never occurred to me as notable.
Okay.
Or it was briefly notable, but not notable enough to like say it on the podcast. And then when you brought it up again after last week's episode, I was like, oh yeah, I should have said something.
Yeah, so Bouffalant is geo-locked. So when we talk about geo-locking, this is in reference to Pokemon Go, which is the app where you have augmented reality and can look around for Pokemon and catch them. And it's mentioned in a couple paragraphs how popular it is in the Pokemon box chapter. And geolocking means there's certain Pokemon in Pokemon Go that you can only find in certain regions of the world.
And it's fairly rare.
It's fairly rare. The Bouffalant itself is even a little bit more unique because by my research, it looks like it's the most region locked, meaning it's only in a small area of the United States, mainly around New York City, and I think it bleeds a little bit into Washington, D.C. as well, from what I could find. And if you combine that information from the Bouffalant and you read the quote that's associated with the Bouffalant, it says, "And we won't see any Bouffalant either, just so you know." That's what Froakie says. And then JCB says, "I didn't tell him I already knew this, as I'd done at least a modicum of research before we left." So I think that is pointing to researching the geolocking of the Bouffalant directly. That's how I'm interpreting that quote, that a modicum of research about a Bouffalant would tell you that the Bouffalant is geolocked to New York City. And so I think that just really just bolsters your theory about the Klefki being a key part of this solve that you come up with during that Pokemon episode, and that Klefki being geolocked to France is important and basically reinforces your theory. Now, I've gone a little crazy and taken that a step further. Let's just mention a couple other French connections. First is talking about the 6-story hotel that JCB went to with his family at 5.5 years old. He says that could have been the Empire State Building or the Eiffel Tower based on how tall it was. And so that, to me, is like more than a coincidence of the day that it's referencing a building in New York City and a building in France, in Paris.
Oh, yeah. I didn't even think about, I mean, we talked about the Eiffel Tower connection. That's kind of how I got to Klefki and Awesome, but I didn't even think about, again, having looked over the Bouffalant and said, oh, whatever, not a big deal. Yeah, I didn't put it together that the other one is in New York, which is the Bouffalant. That's a really good point.
Yes,
Wow.
and you mentioned that he specifically calls out that they were going to travel to the French Quarter during his road trip as well. So
Mm-hmm.
that seems more than coincidental to me, and makes me think that that Bouffalant to Clef Key geolock connection is super legitimate in my mind. So just taking your theory
Wow.
and running with it a bit more.
From the
Bryn,
skeptical one. From the skeptical one, he likes it.
I love it. I love it. You'll see. I love it a lot. I like it a
It's my
lot.
favorite thing you've said all day.
It's favorite thing you've said on the whole series of the podcast.
Ooh.
So Bryn, I think you had pointed out the Alice Coltrane connection, so John Coltrane's wife, and that they had played, John Coltrane and Alice had played a concert in Paris as well. Is that true?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I had talked about them in Japan, but I know there was also Paris as well.
Mm-hmm.
I guess off the top of my head, I can't confirm it was both of them. We know Alice studied music over in Paris.
Right. So I think there's multiple connections to either France, but like I said, I go a little
Correct.
crazy and I'm just like super focused in on Paris because
Right.
in the Kalos region of Pokemon, um, I can't remember the name of the city. I apologize, but there is in the main city of Kalos, which is basically a proxy for Paris. There is an Eiffel Tower inspired building in the middle of that town. So I am right now saying I am focused on cities named Paris somewhere around that road trip map that we talked about in the Pokemon episode, because the Pokemon episode talks about Jon Collins-Black's trip from Statesville, North Carolina to New Orleans to Houston. So I'm trying to redeem myself here after the map fiasco last episode. To Houston, then up to the Ozarks, and then back home. And so what I've done is now mapped all of the cities named Paris that are nearby, and there's actually four. There's four Parises along this road trip that I've mapped out here. So the first one is in Texas. So we go Statesville to New Orleans to Houston, and then your first stop going up to the Ozarks could potentially be Paris, Texas. And then there is also a Paris in Arkansas, which you can see is actually in pretty close proximity to Ozark National Forest. Then there is a Paris in Mississippi, which is a little bit off the beaten path in my mind. You can see it kind of dives down south here. And then there is a Paris, Tennessee as well. So if you're going with my theory that we should be focusing on cities named Paris because of all of these France/Paris connections, then we have four options. I am arguing right now that Arkansas is the most interesting Paris connection at this point. And that is solely based on Arkansas being AR as the state abbreviation. And the reason that's interesting to me is because AR is also an acronym for augmented reality, which that's what Pokemon Go is. It's augmented reality. And he does mention augmented reality in the chapter. And so augmented reality, AR, Arkansas, Paris, Arkansas, solved.
Booking my tickets.
So anyway, I'm going to be focusing on trying to make some additional connections to areas around Paris, Arkansas, and a couple regions you can see I have starred here. A couple of parks around there. I think it's worth doing some investigation of those are public lands, what types of public lands they are. But anyway, that's as far as I've gotten, I would say at this point.
Yeah, I like that AR connection. I think originally when you mentioned Paris, Arkansas, it was mostly around the proximity to the Ozarks, which made that stand out, which I think that alone is pretty valid. But then that AR connection is just an additional layer that feels pretty good.
Okay.
My only concern with the AR is, and I remember specifically looking at the exact terminology he was using in the chapter when I was reading it because it was jumping out to me. And he basically, I think he does use the artificial reality or augmented reality, whatever it is, early in the chapter, but it seems like kind of the more important part of the chapter when he's actually hiding the treasure chest and commenting on what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
He uses the phrase expanded reality.
Right.
And that I just remember that jumping out to me as like very specific terminology to say expanded reality versus augmented reality or artificial reality, whatever he and people would normally call something like Pokemon Go. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that'd be my one concern
I
with leaning too hard into the AR.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's on purpose though that he didn't want to bring emphasis to the AR comment. He puts it once and he doesn't like say augmented reality parentheses AR. He just
Yeah.
mentions augmented reality. And if you do a modicum of research on Pokemon Go, you'll see that it's called an augmented reality game, or the first augmented reality game is what he claims in the chapter. So I take that as a positive, honestly, Cody, that he's explicitly not trying to bring attention to the term augmented reality for this purpose exactly, actually.
I think there's also argument that using the term expanded reality, where it was kind of at the conclusion of the chapter, right above that purplish picture,
Mm-hmm.
could also be a nod towards what we're supposed to be doing with this weird, strange, overexposed picture. Like, how do we use expanded to work with that image itself? So that could be another argument for why he used a different word there.
Yep. Good. 2-1. Um, okay, I've got a bunch of other notes on the Pokemon stuff as well. So, second point, there seems to be the letter X on the Shining Charizard card in the book. And this really expands, Bryn, your finding with the X in some of the pictures throughout the book. So I think you found X's actually in the chapter today. Sorry if I'm spoiling all the FFPNs, but there's an X on the picture in chapter 13, the basketball picture. There is a very clear X in the ship image from chapter 11. And then I think you found at least one or two more in some of the other images earlier in the book as well. So, and the reason I'm a little more confident this is real, and I'm still skeptical, I would say, of whether or not the X's mean anything, is on page 214 of the Pokemon Box chapter. It says, the shine on the dark body of the Charizard illustration makes this card very unique and coveted by players and collectors alike. And so that sentence basically says you should look at that card closely, in my mind, in that the shine on the dark body of the Charizard illustration. And if you go and look very closely at the Shining Charizard card, there's an X on the body, on the dark body. To me, it looks like it's a scratch on the case. I don't know if it was added in post or if it's actually just a scratch on the case. Bryn, you had found the picture from eBay/PSA where that exact card was sold, probably to Jon Collins-Black. And there's no X on that card in that picture. Now, it could be the way that this particular card was scanned in, and now we can see the flaws in the case, and there's an X there. But I don't know. The X theme is starting to gain a little bit of traction. I don't know what we're supposed to do with that. But that was another finding that I wanted to report today.
I also have to think that if you have a card that pristine, I guess I don't know how easy it is to like switch out the box that it's in once it's created like that. Can you not switch it out at all?
You can. It's called
Not
breaking.
easily.
You can break it open.
Oh,
And
so
then
it's
you'd
a big
have to get it
ordeal.
regraded. Yeah.
I see. Okay. I was thinking if it was scratched, like why would you not just put it in a new box?
No,
Sorry.
it's
Probably a
problematic.
dumb comment.
No,
Just put it in a Ziploc bag.
it's not dumb.
But
but it does lend credence that maybe this is not important finding.
I mean, if it is in fact something that he marked up to put an X on this card, it circles all the way back to one of our original conversations about is
Yeah.
manipulating the pictures of the artifacts themselves fair game. And I was a hard no. And I guess based on seeing this, I'm now pretty confident that that's what it is. And that kind of opens up a whole new can of worms.
Yeah, I think
Yeah, I had.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. No. Please, you.
I was going to say I'm less confident than Bryn that that's a real thing. I would say.
I've got one thing for and one thing against the theory. The for would be, and I think it's kind of what Bryn was saying. I might just be rephrasing what she was saying, but I feel like if you have a card that valuable, like you're not going to scratch the case. Just that's like I don't know what more to say about it than that. You're just going to treat it more gingerly. Mm-hmm. So I would think that would be evidence for. Yeah, I don't even know what would be evidence for, but one of the two. I think against it is this goes back to the chapter 1 versus or part 1 versus part 2 conversation. And if we're already talking about X's being a theme through the chapters in part 1, I don't think that's going to carry through to a part 2 chapter. That just seems like something that's too specific and would just like very clearly break his rule about separating them to some extent. That's my thought on that. I also know that he said that each of the 4 boxes in part 2, he wanted to kind of approach each one differently. Like they're kind of different types of solutions to each of them. Mm-hmm. So I don't think you're going to have like the X's are a major clue for part 1, and then also the X's are a major clue for a part 2 box.
Yeah, my mind says that if it is an X and it's legitimate, it's part of lion's share because we've seen all the other X's in the main text, the main part 1 text, I would say.
See, and I think I disagree. I think if it is an intentional X there, it would be a sub clue for specifically the Pokemon box and like a different type of X than part 1.
Okay.
And they're different enough that they're just unrelated. That's the only way that I could see it really being valid in my mind, but agree to disagree on that one.
Yeah. I would be super skeptical of the X if he didn't have the sentence about looking closely at the shiny bot, like the shiny card.
Exactly. That's a really good point.
Strange to me.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's what I got for the X. The other thing we've been looking into together, I think, is talking about the theme of music in the Pokemon box chapter. So there's some musical themes, obviously, in the first story about him going into the jazz bar in New Orleans. But there seems to be a little bit more heavy-handed emphasis on at least noise and sound in the expanded reality section, I would say. So I have a list of kind of cataloging all of the noise mentions here. So on page 213, this is during the Jon Collins-Black 5.5 years old road trip. Obviously, there's a big section about him going into that jazz bar. I heard the silky tones of a baritone saxophone spilling out into the air. That's what drew him to that jazz bar. And then a bunch, another paragraph worth of mentions of music. On page 216, there's mention that this box is made of brass, which is a bit more of a stretch, I think, but you could link brass to brass instruments. I think Jon Collins-Black has been pretty consistent about talking about the materials that the boxes are made of, so I don't put too much credence into this one. Page 217, where he's talking about the expanded reality road trip with Froakie. They meet at a local jazz bar. And that's also the page where he mentions they're listening to John Coltrane, which is appropriate, quote unquote. Page 218, this is where the meat of the sound theme comes in, I would say. Their playful gliding movements warmed my spirit. This was a mentioned, I think, during talking about Magikarp and the other fish. So you could think of gliding movements, their playful gliding movements, as like a trombone, potentially, or even playing a stringed instrument, I would say. Quote unquote, I heard a loud noise. That's when they have the encounter with whatever sounded like a Mabostiff, the dog, like Pokemon, which wasn't there. I heard a rustling noise that was in the leaves when they have the encounter with the raccoon, which Jon Collins-Black originally thought was an Obstagoon. Looking into the Obstagoon a bit, and the Obstagoon was kind of, when it turned out not to be an Obstagoon, which is a Pokemon, Jon Collins-Black was relieved. Now, why he was relieved is this, I think. This is a description of an Obstagoon. While combative to the extreme, it doesn't attack often, as it prefers taunting an opponent into attacking first. When this happens, it uses its signature move, Obstruct, which it threateningly crosses its arms and lets out a staggering yell, so loud and obnoxious that it would cause any opponent to flinch. Obstagoon is the only known Pokemon capable of learning the move Obstruct. So why did he put mention of an Obstagoon, and why were they relieved when it wasn't? I think it's because of this, which is a unique attack for the Obstagoon that is a loud noise. What else do we got here? I took a deep breath and marched on, is a quote from that section. So thinking about, again, brass instruments, you would need a deep breath, and then you march on like a marching band. A cricketune was mentioned in that section, which is like a cricket, which is obviously known for making noise. He also says they saw, there was Ninjask in the area, and Ninjask is interesting because let me find the quote here, sorry. Ninjask moves around at such a high speed that it cannot be seen, even while its crying can be clearly heard. For that reason, this Pokemon was long believed to be invisible. So again, it's another Pokemon that has like this unique sound that's associated with it more so than its other properties. So that's why I'm putting it in this music sound theme collection. Just then I heard a stick snap, and the Froakie came back and landed with a thump onto my pack. So again, 2 more sound references. That's it on page 218. On page 219, we had talked about this, why there's a heavy emphasis on clapping / applause from the Froakie and Greninja. And right now, I think that might relate to an encore, because he had just finished showing the first treasure, which was the Fabergé frog, to Froakie and Greninja. And so then they applause, and then what does he do? He gives them another treasure to look at, which is the Pokemon card, the Charizard card. So that's my light solve on why they're clapping. And because it's music related, they're clapping and they wink at him knowingly because they know he's a musician potentially, and then they want an encore. They want another treasure shown. I'm not all that happy with it. I'm happy that I have at least one explanation for it because that's farther along than we were last time. So maybe confirmation bias here, but linking that to an encore, again, the music theme, I kind of like it. Page 220 is where Jon Collins-Black is leaving Froakie and the Greninja and the Golem, and he bows. Bow could be like end of a performance, right? Bow could also be bowed, B-O-W-E-D, such as a bow for a musical instrument. That's a bit more of a stretch, I would say. And then he says, as I rested back in my hotel room, a rest is a musical term for when the music, has a little break. I think that's what I have for the main chapter. And then Cody, I know you have mentioned coda as being a musical term from Joy's Serenade, if we want to go there. I know there's some consternation about that. And then there's obviously other music references, a conductor's baton in the second stanza of Joy's Serenade. So really long laundry list of potential confirmation bias here, admittedly. But it just seems so heavy-handed in my mind that especially page 218 is like really heavy with sound references. And I don't know what to make of that. I'm just collecting information at this point, but that's where I'm at. Comments? Okay.
No, I really like it. I think especially the clapping, that was like just super weird to me inside. Like you said, like maybe it's a rough explanation, but I do really like that it's something to be working with and that it does fit so nicely in with like this performance that we're talking through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think it gets us closer to a solve, but it's a path we can go down to see if we can integrate, the circle of fifths or John Coltrane's quote unquote jar of flies that I like very much that you pointed out, Cody. I don't quite know what to do with that yet, but it's at least a path to go down.
Yeah, I've read through the chapter now a handful of times, and the last few times that I read it, there's two specific parts that I got a gut feeling that they're related in some way, and you've related them together through your music theory here. But that is the quote where he talks about drawing a blank. Sorry. The quote where he talks about Froki and
Greninja.
what is it? Greninja. I keep on saying ninjas because they're both the ninjas. Yeah, sorry. Right. Froki and Greninja clapping feverishly. And then he says, wow, you guys are really good at that. And then I think they wink at him knowingly.
Mm-hmm.
That's all that one part there.
Yeah.
And then the part later on in the chapter where he bows to Froki,
mm-hmm.
but then I think he says he bows to Froki and then shakes the other one's hand.
Yeah.
So I think hand theme. I think there's something going on there. I want to say I know part of the Pokemon games and Pokemon in general is that Pokemon can have a held item. So I'm kind of toying with the idea of maybe Froki left, came back and had a held item with him. And that's why him being able to clap was so notable. And then why Jon Collins-Black bowed to him instead of shaking his hand, but then shook everyone else's hand.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't love that idea that much. It's just, I'm just kind of spitballing. But it just seems like every time I read through that, I get a stronger and stronger gut feeling that those two things are related in some way. Those two excerpts from the chapter.
Yeah.
And I like that you've related them through your music theory.
Yeah, hand theme. I have a couple other notes. The Greninja, I think, is important because one of his special moves is to make that water shuriken, which is like a water ninja star. And star leads us back to the John Coltrane jar of flies as well, because that's a star pattern he's drawn on there between the C's and the music scale. And so is that the reason Jon Collins-Black picked Froki to begin with? Because it's kind of an obscure Pokemon. I mean, he does talk about catching frogs or avoiding frogs in his actual road trip. So maybe that's why the Froakie was selected. But if there's a connection to be made because Jon Collins-Black wanted to use Greninja in the story because of the water shuriken to try to point us in the direction of a star pattern, that's one explanation. I don't think...
Well, to me, the whole point of the Froakie, beyond the box being hidden somewhere where there are, frogs and amphibians and whatnot, the biggest thing for me with my previous solve that I talked about would be the tie to the Kalos region, because he's a starter Pokemon for the Kalos region.
Got it.
Okay. So that's like the one big hard tie I've got to the Froakie. With what you just said, just want to call out a specific line from the chapter that what you're talking about made me think of. And that's where he said, I thought about scheduling some training for the Froakie to assist him in becoming his more capable Greninja self. I figured this might help us along our way.
Mm-hmm.
So he does directly call out that if they had a Greninja, it would be more helpful for them.
Right.
Also, wasn't there an evolution that was skipped to get from Froakie to Greninja?
Frogadier.
Okay, so we skipped Frogadier. My apologies. Yeah, so that could also be an argument that like we had to jump to this level to get to the star. I don't know if a Frogadier has anything to do with the star, but it sounds like that maybe is specific to the Greninja.
The Frogadier Pokemon that's in between Froakie and Greninja just looks like such an awkward teenager Pokemon in the in all of the depictions of it.
A little bonus Discord detective in this segment. Somebody did mention that why didn't the Froakie want to eat the flies in the jar of flies? It's mentioned that maybe he wasn't hungry. So some people have speculated that Froakie might actually be a Mew or Mewtwo in disguise. I don't know how to put that together into a solve, but anyway, I thought that was an interesting speculation.
Yeah, we talked in the Pokemon episode, the last episode, about how it was Mew, right, who can transform into other Pokemon. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think that's well, I have one more just side comment. The Froakie, when the Froakie leaves Jon Collins-Black, is that a metaphor for when Jon Collins-Black got ahead of his family in the actual story?
I hadn't thought about that. That's an interesting take.
Because he, quote unquote, was out onto the sidewalk like a flash, and then got ahead of his parents and grandparents, and basically was alone for a bit, and then got reunited. Same thing with the Froakie. Doesn't lead us anywhere in my mind, but it's just an interesting coincidence, I thought.
Yeah, well, that's a good connection too.
All right. That's everything up to date for the Pokemon box solve that I wanted to add on to your solve. I don't think it's as solid and doesn't really get us as far as yours did, but I thought it was interesting to discuss nonetheless.
I think everything you said is really, really valuable. And I think that Buffalo take is instrumental in really reinforcing some of the things we said in the last episode.
Yeah,
Buffalo and then the Empire State Building, that whole connection there just really doubles down on what we were thinking.
I think so too. Yep. He really wanted us to get to New York Paris connection, seemingly, with multiple clues that lead us that direction. So
yeah, and then the geolocking, all that.
All right. Should we dive into Mailbag?
Mailbag. We've got mail.
All right. We're going to cover 2 emails based on the last chapter that we covered last episode, chapter 12, the massive gold nugget from the Rush. That is the incorrect title, but it's from the Gold Rush chapter. So we got 2 emails I want to cover today. First is by Scott. Scott writes in and says he wanted to share a little nugget he found in chapter 12. But he says maybe it's more like a horseshoe and hand grenade or even a coincidence of the day. So good job using all the correct terminology there, Scott. I'll just read some of this verbatim. In the saloon drawing on page 108, it's actually page 109, sorry. On on the back wall, there appears to be a painting of a Native American putting an ear to the ground. So let me pull up that portion. Actually, let me read a little bit more first. If you Google Native American ear to the ground, the first image result, and many of the results are the illustrations from the front page of the book Last of the Mohicans, which looks very similar to the image in the saloon. The natives are even dressed the same. And so let me pull up the picture of the Last of the Mohicans art so you can have that as reference first. So here is the Last of the Mohicans. You can see the Native American kind of having his ear to the ground here. And Scott basically says this image in the back of the saloon looks like it could be a reference to that. And I have a more clear image here I can pull up. So keep your eyes peeled here. So here's a zoomed in image of that image, the painting in the back of the saloon that he's referencing. And I don't know, are you guys convinced that that looks like it's a Native American putting their ear to the ground?
I would have never, ever made that connection on my own. I think what I'm struggling with is like the round, the big oval really feels like it would need to tie in with something. Can I see it? Yes. I don't know.
All right.
That's tough. That's really tough.
Cody, what do you feel?
If this is the only connection, I would say not strong enough. If there were like other connections that were found to the Last of the Mohicans, and this was like, one of a package of connections, I would consider it.
Okay.
To me, it more looks like a woman crawling along the ground with like the ovals her head and hair on top, and then a arm reaching. But that doesn't really make much sense.
I
either.
see that. Yeah.
Okay. It definitely, I mean, when you just see kind of the shape of it and then the shape of the picture from the Last of the Mohicans, they're very similar shapes, but then there's some weird details in this one that kind of, like Bryn said, kind of draw your attention more to the oval, which would be what? The guy's butt? Maybe that's the hint.
Well, the X is on Shining Charizard's butt too, so maybe there's a butt theme.
Butt theme.
But yeah, there's more context to this from Scott's email. Let me continue on here. He says, after tumbling down this rabbit hole, I learned that Last of the Mohicans was filmed in Asheville, North Carolina, and the surrounding areas in the Blue Ridge Mountains. And Jon Collins-Black has mentioned both Asheville and the Blue Ridge in the book. So there is some leading connections, I would say, to if this is supposed to be representative of Last of the Mohicans. It's obviously many steps away, I would say. And he admittedly says, which I think is true, he says, could these little pearls be nudging us towards North Carolina? And there's another nugget that I'll share from Scott in just a second. But the point I want to make is he says, it's probably just AI noise and coincidence. But I thought it noteworthy. So he, admittedly says he thinks this is an AI image. I do too. I think we all do. And maybe if he's asking for a Western saloon, the AI image generator pulled that very famous Last of the Mohicans image and generated what you see in the back, a rough image of that. So anyway, I think we're all in agreement that this is, a little bit loose and it could be just AI garble. But I thought it was cool nonetheless.
Yeah, this episode's going to be getting too long to go into the weeds of the AI photos. But when we have a chance, I got lots to talk about with the potential for AI photos and whatnot.
But, yeah, there's more. The second email you're going to love then.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll give them all my different monologues and spiels in a different episode. But I do want to say just an impressive find to get Last of the Mohicans from that. And yeah, to me, it looks like a very similar shape, and I wouldn't have got there.
When he sent that, I looked in the book and I'm like, I don't know where he's talking about. But then I did eventually find He's absolutely right. That picture in the back does look like that. So super cool find. Scott also mentions a little bit more about North Carolina, which I think is a really cool nugget here. He says, another fun fact is that this chapter refers to California's nickname, the Golden State, which is true. But what many people don't know is that North Carolina was referred to as the Golden State long before California, because North Carolina had a massive gold rush, which began 50 years prior to California's. So North Carolina is actually the OG Golden State. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think last episode we had talked about these Golden State references and connections, and like in our minds, that's surely California.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it references now another state potentially, especially when that's, you know, a place that is also referenced elsewhere in the book,
Yeah.
I think that also then just really raises an eyebrow to, well, how should we be interpreting all of these things that we were initially thinking were so strong for California? Yeah, I really like it.
Yeah, it's a really good fact to have. Really good fact to have in the back of our minds, especially moving forward and all the talk about gold and golden states. My only concern with North Carolina is, you know, GCB grew up there, and there's so many other ties to North Carolina that if there are North Carolina clues, it's going to be really hard to separate the clues from just all of his stories about growing up in North Carolina.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I'm hoping it's not in North Carolina.
Okay, so that was...
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Bryn. Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, it almost seems like there's too many things pointing to North Carolina that it wouldn't be North Carolina. So watch it be in North Carolina.
He just buried it in the backyard of his childhood home.
Not buried. All right. Second email along the same lines. This is from Barrett. It's entitled, "What the heck is on the card table in the saloon picture?" And so he points out the quote in the book, if mining couldn't satisfy one's gambling spirit, card tables offered their own kind of opportunities. So he's arguing that maybe Jon Collins-Black is trying to point us to looking at that card table in the chapter. And I'll have a zoomed in picture of that as well. Let me pull it up. Shoot, maybe I don't have it ready to go. Anyway, there seems to be what he calls a piano shape that shows up on that card table. And I apologize, I don't have the picture, but again, this is on page 109. If you want to reference There's Treasure Inside book. There's a piano potentially looking object, and then there's some little dots around that piano looking shape. And he says, you know, it could be symbols for music, which accounts for the piano, or to him, it kind of looks like Sanskrit. So we have to show that picture to Cody since he's our resident language expert to see if it's some sort of Sanskrit or other font. But there's some interesting symbols around the piano-shaped looking object, I would say. So I thought that was super cool as well. Again, focusing on this picture, which I don't think we got too many nuggets out of last episode.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, it seems, you know, heavy in the AI, where it's hard to dissect when so many things just seem pretty wonky.
Yep.
I guess I'm not seeing the piano.
It's kind of right in the front, and you'll see those little dots kind of surrounding it in an oval. It kind of has a piano back shape, kind of a hook back.
Oh, as if it were like a miniature piano?
Yes, tiny, just on top of the card table. Exactly.
I see. Okay, I was expecting like a keyboard on a table.
No.
Okay.
So anyway,
gotcha.
Something to keep your eye out on. So that was 2 really excellent mailbags of information that I think is interesting. I think we're in agreement. The AI is questionable, whether or not the images mean anything. And you did find the X on the horse at the top of the saloon picture, Bryn. You had mentioned that. But anyway, mailbag coming through clutch here with some additional goodies that we can look at. All right, Discord detective time. Don't panic, everyone. This will be pretty quick. 2 users in the Calazar's Discord has brought this particular topic to our attention. I think it's probably more of an interest/fun topic, more so than anything that's probably useful in a solve. But they had pointed out this website called What 3 Words. And you could Google that, What 3 Words, and it will pop right up. Basically, it's a website that has made the whole Earth into a grid, and each grid, which it's a pretty small block of land. I'll pull up a picture of that, hopefully. Here. So this is a screenshot of What 3 Words, and basically you can see there's a small grid, I think it's maybe like 10 by 10 feet. And each of these boxes on the entire planet Earth has 3 unique words that are associated with that particular spot. So anyway, very light speculation on the Discord that What 3 Words, if you can come up with 3 words that are key to a particular chapter or solve, might be a clue towards an exact location of a treasure. So this is a pretty cool system. You can imagine that GPS coordinates are fairly clunky, and this is basically a way to identify anywhere on Earth using 3 words, which are much more memorable than coordinates to identify a particular location geographically. So that's about as far as the Discord detective segment goes for this one, but I thought it was kind of a cool little project. You guys can look it up and see what 3 words are associated with your home. And anyway, something to just keep on the back of your mind. If you come up with 3 words as a solve, try plugging it into What 3 Words and see if it gives you a location.
I'm going to just really go off the rails here, just finding keywords and trying every combination, see if it's in the United States. It is,
Anyway.
I mean, outside of even the hunt, it's kind of a cool idea.
Yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to share it, is just because I thought it was a cool idea and a cool implementation of a geolocation tool that's actually easier than GPS. All right. Coincidence of the day, Cody.
All right. You ready for it?
Yeah.
All right. Take your map off the screen. It's getting in the way of my coincidence.
I'm sorry. I forgot about that. My bad.
That's all good. I'll try and make this as quick as possible because I know we're running a little bit long here. It's more Pokemon stuff. Obviously, just like Blake, after the last episode, I kind of felt like we were making our first real strides towards something that I felt like there's a high probability we're actually doing the right thing here, or at least making a step in the right direction for the first time for me. So I got excited too. I looked into some more Pokemon stuff, and I found some stuff that is good enough for coincidence of the day. So I want to make that disclaimer right off the bat. Some of the stuff we've talked about in the last episode and earlier this episode, I stand behind. What I'm about to say is something that I think is a coincidence. Very low chance it could be useful in some way, but I want to just differentiate between what we have been talking about, what we're about to talk about. I don't think this is correct. It is also, once again, totally predicated on, or most of this is predicated on, believing the previous very loose theory that potentially the 4 different stanzas of the beginning of Joy's Serenade line up with the 4 part 2 boxes.
Okay.
So, okay. There's my background and my disclaimer, and now I'm going to get into the actual coincidence of the day. So the coincidence of the day is going to revolve around a gym leader named Clemont. He's my kind of, again, don't actually stand behind this, but if you were to believe this coincidence, he would be kind of my next key person or item in the Pokemon world to start looking at.
Okay.
So Clemont is in the Kalos region. as previously discussed, we kind of that part's where we're going down the Kalos region path. He is the 5th gym leader. So if anyone believes in the 5 theme, I'm actually not a true believer in the 5 theme, but I know that some people are. 5th gym leader. His gym is the one that's in Lumio City, which is the Paris city.
Perfect.
And his gym that he is the gym leader of is actually the gym that the Eiffel Tower is based off of. So that's that landmark. So he's this guy. He's that guy.
Okay.
Let's see here. The theme of his gym in the game, at least, is like a game show. So that's unique to him, and also something I thought is very JCB-esque, where he talks about this. I think the quote I'm thinking of particularly is in the Past and Future Box chapter, but he talks about like being into different games and escape rooms and stuff like that, and just kind of all of that gamey culture. Okay, so now that's a little bit of background on how I got to him and how I started feeling like could be involved in some way. Everything else I found then, just without me trying, kept reinforcing the second stanza of Joyce Serenade theory. So the second stanza of Joyce Serenade is our conductor, as with a trace of a baton through the air, gives direction. While the coda is incomplete, there's a flutter of excitement around.
Okay.
So he is, the gym leaders have different types. He is the electric gym leader and has electric Pokemon. So our conductor, there's my connection there.
Okay.
This is super loose, but all of his like primary artwork, he's depicted pointing and has like a second arm because he's like a little inventor guy out of his back that's also pointing. So he talks about giving direction, like tracing a baton. I think that's really loose, but I wanted to include that.
Okay.
And then the last thing I've got here, I think, is sorry, actually I have 2 more things. He created, like in world, created the Rotom Pokedex, which is a type of Pokedex. As far as I know, he's like the only character that's like affiliated with a Pokedex.
Okay.
And we talked previously how the coda is incomplete. Kind of, I think it was you, Blake, who said it kind of reminds you of the Codex, which could be tied to a Pokedex in some way. So he's got that connection. And then the last one I had was in-game, there's like in-game news, and they'll talk about people. And there's, in like the Pokemon wiki, there were 2 short paragraphs, like basically sentences, about Clemont that were listed.
Okay.
And it was, this is going to sound so dumb with me reading this, but I'm going to cut out most of it to just the part where she says, "Yeek, Clemont has arrived. He's cute, so cute. His glasses make my heart flutter."
Oh, okay.
So keyword there, there's a flutter of excitement all around.
Okay.
So I've got, these are coincidences. I'm not standing behind this.
You've made that very clear. Don't worry. Nobody's gonna get you.
Everyone's gonna say it's a dumb idea, Cody. So those are kind of my connections. Our conductor connection with the trace of the baton through the air, very loose connection, gives direction. While the coda connection is incomplete, there's a flutter connection of excitement all around. It just seemed like, kind of reading up on this guy, he had a lot of connections to the stuff we already talked about, and then a lot of connections to this like Joyce Serenade thing where he kind of loosely fit in there. I've said it 100 times. I don't believe this, but I thought there was a lot of coincidences and was notable to bring up.
Cool. No, that is a lot of coincidences. And
that's what the segment's for.
Connecting them to Joyce Serenade is particularly dangerous, I would say, but yeah, really cool.
I would say that too.
Okay. We have about 100 disclaimers in there, but you didn't even have to seek them out. They just came right to you. Awesome.
They did. They came right to me. Yeah, and I have to have the disclaimers because when I did my Joyce Serenade theory, I was already only like 20% behind that. I kind of didn't really believe it. So now I'm doing even something looser based off of that.
Right. No, cool. That fits coincidence today very nicely. So that's cool. Good finds, Cody.
Thank you.
All right. We should hop into the chapter today, I think. Chapter 13, the best of its class Jordan rookie card. And this is with a subheading, Be Like Mike. 2 quotes associated with this. He who keeps his cool best wins. From Norman Cousins. Who knows who Norman Cousins is? Okay, he's a political writer and I guess had a lot of interest in anti-war efforts during the Cold War. And so I don't think he who keeps his cool best wins is necessarily associated with Michael Jordan. But the theme is in terms of making sure you're not being too erratic.
He was the laugh therapy guy too, right?
He was the laugh therapy guy who spent 10 minutes laughing per day or something, and it made him feel really good and sleep really well.
I think he had other actual medical conditions too that he attributed his mitigation of those medical conditions to the laugh therapy.
Right.
But that's besides the point. I just want to prove that I did read up on that.
Okay. You passed the test today with the laugh therapy comment. Good. And then the second quote is from Michael Jordan himself. Just play, have fun, enjoy the game.
Brand, did you read up on who that Michael Jordan is?
That is a theme of the chapter, is that you don't have to look up who Michael Jordan is because he is so famous. So this chapter opens up with the mention of Be Like Mike and how that was a very, very popular phrase in the early 90s because Gatorade had a commercial campaign, let's say, that was Be Like Mike with Michael Jordan as their main spokesperson. Lots of television commercials, and he mentions some other 90s nostalgia. Once you pop, you can't stop. Pringles and Got Milk for milk. Michael Jordan was the greatest basketball player to ever play the game. So we're not going to have a LeBron versus Michael Jordan debate on this podcast. You can listen to about any other sports show in the world to talk about that. Jon Collins-Black mentioned he won every championship he ever played in. That was Michael Jordan, not Jon Collins-Black, obviously, as we'll find out. There's lots of then Michael Jordan accolades listed, like a whole paragraph full of them. And then Jon Collins-Black talks about how Michael Jordan received the Presidential Medal of Freedom from Barack Obama. And part of that quote from Barack Obama that's in the book is, he is the definition of somebody so good at what they do that everyone recognizes them. So going back to your question, Michael Jordan needs no introduction. Then Jon Collins-Black talks about him growing up in North Carolina, and that is where Michael Jordan played basketball for the University of North Carolina. And Jon Collins-Black recollects meeting Michael Jordan at a local high school gym for a pickup game and autograph signing after Michael Jordan became famous for hitting a game-winning shot in the March Madness. Talks about acquiring the Jordan rookie card, which is in the treasure, in one of the treasures, he doesn't specify which, and that it's the best of its class PSA 9 rated card. So it's not a 10 out of 10, but it is a really nice 9 out of 10 card. Michael Jordan portrays like a sense of coolness, and that coolness can prevail. And Jon Collins-Black says getting too excited or too nervous can cause one to lose one's way. So Michael Jordan is kind of our poster child of somebody that performs really well and stays cool under pressure and never gets too excited. And that's why he's so successful at what he's doing. Talks about his dad. This is Jon Collins-Black. His dad putting up a basketball hoop when Jon Collins-Black was 8 years old, and him spending hours a day shooting baskets and imagining himself as Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, and then later Michael Jordan. Then we get into this really entertaining vignette, I would say, about Jon Collins-Black trying out for his middle school basketball team. He said 50 people tried out for 12 spots on the team. Jon Collins-Black was admittedly smaller and weaker than most of the other participants, but he played really good defense and made some good passes and some good shots and some steals during tryouts. Tryouts was over the course of a week, which is crazy. And he ended up actually making the final roster spot out of the 12 that were available. And the order of the roster when it was posted was indicative of where their position was, and he was 12th out of 12 and rode the bench for 2/3 of the season. About 2/3 into the season, they were about to play their weakest team in their conference, and that weakest team also had two of their best players as injured at the time. So Jon Collins-Black thought this would be his opportunity maybe to get into the game for the first time during the season. He mentions that it was the biggest home crowd of the season, and they had a big pep rally beforehand. He mentions that as the game was progressing, they're getting a bigger and bigger lead. So he's getting, more and more eager that he might be able to get in the game. And with 2 minutes left in the game, they were up by 28 points. At that point, the coach told him, "Get in." His teammates were super excited. Everybody was super happy because this was his first time getting into a game for the season. They are lining up for a foul shot when he gets in, and he is able to get a rebound, and he takes it and dribbles down the court, passes a defender, and makes a really nice lay-in at the other end of the court. The problem is that was the other team's basket. Oof. And he says it was the most embarrassing moment of his life, Cody. So, advice to his kids was don't be like Jon Collins-Black and get excited or out of control. Instead, channel your inner Michael Jordan, and a sense of cool will help keep you focused on the prize. He says there exists a fine line between passion, excitement, and chaos. Jon Collins-Black also emphasizes that Michael Jordan wasn't always the best person on the court and didn't actually make the varsity team during his sophomore or junior year. It wasn't clear. It was when Michael Jordan was 16 years old. And so over the course of that year, when he didn't make the varsity team, he spent all his effort, Michael Jordan did, improving his game, and then suddenly became not only on the varsity team, but one of the highest recruited players into college. Jon Collins-Black realizes that he, isn't Michael Jordan and can't necessarily be the best at anything, but he wants to always aspire to become the best version of himself. End scene. Questions or comments about the Michael Jordan chapter?
I was really scared to read this because I was forewarned that it was going to be cringy and embarrassing. I didn't think that was that embarrassing. I maybe living it more so, but not too bad.
Was it as embarrassing as buying a fake Jon Collins-Black book?
No.
Okay. No. Cool.
Jumping from our Pokemon discussion to this made me think while you were talking, I was thinking Space Jam, augmented reality.
Interesting. Okay.
I don't think it's anything, but I was thinking it.
Space Jam theme. Write it down, everybody.
Space Jam theme. This seemed like another pretty linear chapter compared to. It seems like he's getting more and more straightforward as the book's going on. Remember some of those first chapters, he was really all over the place, trying to fit in a lot of content. So, just that's interesting.
I'm trying to see how many total chapters are there in part 1?
23.
23. Michael Jordan number. Ooh.
Right. So I guess I was gonna say my first thought would be that this would be chapter 23 because of 23, obviously, Michael Jordan's number. But it is not. So I guess I don't have anything to say other than now I'm just kind of thinking through why we talked earlier about the the progress that the book makes, and where certain chapters are within context of others and what that means. He very easily could have thrown this in as the last chapter and had it be 23, but it's not. So I don't have anything to conclude from that yet, but it seems that there is a reason for this being where it's at in the book.
Yeah, well, I think my gut feeling would be he doesn't want to end the book with, and then that was the most embarrassing moment of my life.
Yeah,
The end.
yeah. No, I don't know. I have no points to make here. I'm just thinking it through.
I mean, the segue between the gold miners chapter is, while overexuberance led to challenges for many California miners, our next chapter is about a man who embodies the opposite. He is the epitome of calm, cool, and collected. So that's the transition Jon Collins-Black makes for going into the Michael Jordan chapter next.
That's fair. I forget I ever said anything.
I'm not a big sports historian, especially basketball. But I had in my mind that Michael Jordan was famously fueled by emotion. But maybe he was both cool, calm, and collected and also fueled by emotion at the same time.
I think that was all in his head. He would get himself worked up and create these false narratives to make him want to really beat someone.
Yeah, but still cool and calm on the outside and not scoring on the wrong hoop.
Right. All right. Do we have any Forrest Fenn Picked Nuggets that you guys want to go into? I'm happy to go first if you'd like.
Go for it.
All right. The nugget that I picked out here is the one I just lost. Okay. It is something very specific about the embarrassing situation he was in. So in the story, he talks about how many points his team was ahead after the first quarter, after the second quarter, after the third quarter, exactly when he went in. And he mentions that at 2 minutes, 34 seconds, that's when he got into the game because they were up by 28 points. And it's really hard for me to believe that he is not just making up those numbers and approximating. I played basketball a long time. I cannot tell you one time or one score at a particular time ever. Maybe because it wasn't the most embarrassing moment of my life, but regardless, that seems like it's contrived to me. And so the nugget I'm picking out here is particular to the 2 minutes and 34 seconds. And this episode's so thematic because we were just talking about GPS coordinates. GPS coordinates uses a system that are degrees, minutes, and seconds. For that is a version of GPS coordinates. So I'm wondering if this 2 minutes and 34 seconds may end up being a clue at some point. Obviously, the minutes and seconds are zoomed in to a certain region, to a smaller geographical area. You would need the degrees as well to know an exact GPS coordinate, but I'm wondering if this might lead to maybe a more specific location for the lion's share as a clue at some point.
It's a good point. We've talked.
Pick out 3 keywords.
Be like Mike.
I like that FFPN. And yeah, we've talked about how he's said he has to take creative liberties on some of the stuff, but then it also seems oddly specific. Why not just say 2 minutes, 30 seconds or something? Yeah, I like it.
Thanks.
Yeah, I like it too.
Do you want me to go?
Go for it, yeah.
Okay, mine is 8 years old. That's my quote. That's my FFPN. 8 years old. Okay. And the reason it is because he hyphenated it. 8-years-old.
Okay.
Page 97 of the book, he says 11 years old, no hyphens. Page 137, he says 16 years old, no hyphens. Page 162, he says 13 years old, no hyphens. And in this chapter, 8-years-old. And I'm officially making the claim here that we're making my stance known that the hyphen theory is my leading theory for part 1. After seeing this one, it's all right, this is just too much. Unless he's just completely just typing whatever he wants to type whenever he wants to type it, and no one's looking at the syntax throughout the book and making it all match. It's just too weird for the hyphens there and then not elsewhere. Tell me it's not hyphenated on your version.
No, nothing. No. Not gonna crush your dreams here. So is this associated with hyphens, associated with numbers, or you're just saying the hyphen theme in general?
Hyphen theme in general.
Okay.
And I don't know. I don't have any leads on it. It's just too many. There's too many instances of weird hyphens, and it's not a new idea. I know people have been talking about hyphens for a month or two now, but I'm buying into that one.
Okay.
I'm buying into the hyphen idea.
I've also bought in, and I hate to because it's such an overwhelming and daunting thing to try to wrap your head around. I mean, yes, we can go back through the book and make every notation of every situation both ways, but then like, what do we do with that? Do we need to be noting where in the paragraph it's at, which page is that? Like, I think we have to figure out a rule before we can proceed. Which I don't know if anyone's been able to connect those dots yet.
Yeah, too scary.
Yeah,
I don't know where to begin.
Scary.
Right. Good. I like it. I kind of like it.
All right. Mine is, and this is probably stupid, but I mean, it goes with the theme of the chapter. Okay, so my quote is, a sense of cool will help keep you focused on the prize. Which it seemed directly correlated to the prize being the treasure. And then also, if we go back to the quote just at the beginning of the chapter, that was about keeping your cool. Like, yes, this whole chapter is be like Mike, keep your cool. Michael Jordan's cool. He was composed, and this is part of what made him the greatest of all time. So I don't know. It could just be part of that theme in general, and there's nothing more to it. But I think having him tie it into, like, what did it say? Focused on the prize. Kind of just piqued my interest a little bit more than it would have otherwise, I think, just in the context of the chapter. So
I had that one listed as one of my flakes.
Okay, that makes me feel a little better.
No, I mean, I think you could even take it super literally and say that the treasure would be somewhere cold, right? Because a sense of cool will keep you focused on the prize. I don't know. I'm also
Alaska
thinking
back in play.
I'm also thinking it seems like we get on average about one of these every chapter or so, where he's like says something about treasure or prize or treasure hunt, like one sentence in every chapter, and it's starting to stand out that way. And I'm almost wondering if we compiled like a list of all of those things he said, if it all kind of whittles the area down slowly, of like somewhere where you'd picnic, somewhere that's cool, somewhere, that yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, we should just create a running list.
This will be the first entry, but yeah, it'd be worth going back and during the reread, figure out if we can find all of the sentences associated with the treasure, or in this case, prize. I actually picked up on that as well. I didn't write it down as a nugget or a flake, but it did catch my eye and I thought about it. So you're not way off there, Bryn. I like it very much.
Okay, thank you. Teamwork.
All right. Flakes. Going back to the light or laser theme, he mentions that when he looked at the scoreboard, it was red electric numbers that burned bright. And that just caught my eye. Don't know what to do with it. But I thought it was interesting.
Eyes like blue lasers.
Coming off Pokemon box with the red ruby eyes, that stood out to me too.
Yep. Cody.
I got a flake. My flake is, you guys probably have this too. He was the basketball 007, never stirred, never shaken. Another one that just seemed like a weird out of place sentence.
Yeah.
Also, and I wasn't even going to say this, but because Bryn pulled in Pokemon again. I got to too now. In the Pokemon box, he says it was something along it was hauntingly beautiful. And that stood out to me because there's a Pokemon named Haunter, who is the pre-evolution of my favorite Pokemon, Gengar. Uh, hauntingly beautiful Pokemon named Haunter. One of the fun fact pieces of trivia about Haunter is his name originally was Spectre. 007 ties it all back together between part
Okay,
one and
but
part two.
I feel like that the Haunter thing would have been good to bring up with the Pokemon box, because
No,
that's
because
a really puzzling thing
I
too.
agree.
I don't-
You should have mentioned that, Cody.
Yeah.
Mentioned it for what?
That it's
The
There's no-
haunted,
I mean,
the hauntingly beautiful landscape or
it's a
whatever.
very weird sentence in the Pokemon box that I haven't been able to piece together. And now that you're saying that that's a Pokemon name, you should have told
I'm
us
sorry.
that.
My threshold for what I'm sharing, I guess, is too high. Because
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Live in my brain in a second. These things are all like SOS, buy your plane ticket. We have very different
Sorry.
thresholds.
Yeah, my threshold for sharing is the Mabistiff one I should have shared because I didn't. Yeah. Anyway, episode's long. I gotta.
Okay. Bryn.
I would like to point out that we have another quote of "My enthusiasm never waned,"
Oh,
which I think
I
that's
like
the
that.
at least third time where he has used this exact quote in part one.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I can't say part one for sure. I think they've all been part one so far.
Yeah. No, I didn't pick up on that, but I like the moon theme, so sun moon theme. I should have picked that out. I didn't. I missed it. Good catch. My last one was just when I mentioned during the reading that there's an X in the in the layup picture in this chapter.
Yeah. Pretty obvious one. Should be able to see that one right off the bat.
Mm-hmm. That's all I got.
I just have a couple quick more. The quote was, "I had a steal or two or three." That seemed awkward and intentional. And then also when he was reading the roster to see if his name was on the list, he said the first 10 names belonged to other boys. The 11th also belonged to someone else. And then he was the 12th, which seemed weird. Maybe just kind of like building suspense and like his, internal thought process as he was reading this as a child. But both of those things seemed pretty awkward to me.
Yeah, I read that a couple times, and I think it was trying to represent that he was trying to read the list over other people, and then he saw the 11th name, and then he saw his name. That was my reading of it, but you're right that it is a little bit awkward. Cody, you got any other flakes for the audience?
No.
All right.
He's just sitting on a full solve that he doesn't think is valid.
Cody, are you looking at Gengar right now?
No, I'm looking at something else. I'll talk about it. It's not important.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
It's below the threshold. It's not important.
Theme discussion. I will put out the trademarked transcending circumstances for Jon Collins-Black himself in this one. Yay.
I was going to say,
did he?
Michael Jordan.
Okay. Maybe.
Yeah, because he was, I think Michael Jordan fits better than JCB.
No.
He's like the...
JCB embarrassed himself, and that's the end of the chapter.
Yeah, but making the team was extremely transcending circumstances.
Yeah.
He wore jeans to his tryout.
I don't know. I think transcending circumstances would be if he didn't ride the bench the whole season.
But making the team out of 50...
Him making the team.
Absolutely.
He made the team.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I also think Michael Jordan is just like a classic example like of this scenario and story. Like, oh, the greatest of all time didn't initially make his varsity squad, and he put in all this time and effort to make the team and then become the greatest. So,
and you know what he didn't do? He didn't ride the bench on the Bulls.
We're talking about JCB making the team.
Okay. Themes. Real quick. Music. Don't remember any. Fatherhood, kind of, because he talks about his dad's advice, right? If I remember correctly.
Yeah. He does. Him putting up the basketball hoop, certainly.
And him giving advice to his kids.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Generational.
Maybe I think that might be the one I'm thinking of. Wind, I don't remember any wind stuff. World's Fair, no. Transcending Circumstances, debatable. Flowers, botanical stuff, I don't think so.
I wonder if there
Water,
was
salt water, no.
World's Fair in Chicago ever. I'll look it up while you keep going.
Yeah, that would seem likely.
Feminism, I don't think so. Celestial, I would have said no, but you guys just brought up the moon stuff. Yes, Blake.
Actually, the feminism one, the guy that we quoted at the beginning of this chapter, Norman Cousins, he was something. He had a anti-feminist swing to some of his early works, actually. And the Wikipedia article said that he was joking, but there's some like pretty awkward quotes that are in that section. So I would say anti-feminism theme in this one if we're going down the rabbit hole, which I was a little bit shocked by that Jon Collins-Black would include this particular person as a quote in the book. Sorry to interrupt.
Right. No, I think that was the celestial we just talked about. The moon, hand theme, new edition, butt theme.
Butt theme.
Oh, butt theme also ties in with that Appalachian Trail box with the white mark on the seat.
Oh man. Solved.
All right. Chicago, it looks like, has had 2 World's Fairs in 1893 and 1933-34. You're making the connection between Michael Jordan playing and being famous for the Chicago Bulls. Cool.
Yeah, cool. Keep our eye on that World's Fair one.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, it keeps creeping back in.
And yeah, during the reread, it's worth going back and trying to capture more World's Fair because we only picked up on it, I think, starting chapter 7, Amelia Earhart. So curious if we find more connections. Or send a message into the mailbag, tips.ttiunofficialpodcast@gmail.com, or look at the link below wherever you're consuming this media. That is an episode, and we will wrap it up for tonight. Thanks, everybody.
Searching for